Happy Wednesday, everyone. Scott Rueck is here talking about Oregon State. A lot to get into, a really interesting program that tells a lot about where women's basketball has been and where it's going. Locked on Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm your host, Howard Megdal. I want to thank you for making us your first listen every day. You guys keep showing up for us, over 300,000 of you in December 2024 alone, the way we show up for you 6 days a week. And of course, it is not just me, it is the incredible team across the board over at the Next Hoops. We had over 100 reported pieces every single month in 2024. It's why 30 million of you read us across our email channels and on the site as well. You want to be part of it? You want to make sure you get those all to your inbox? Go to thenexthoops.com. $9 a month, $72 a year. We cover the broad landscape of women's basketball. And in doing so, we have had the pleasure, and I will say as a point of personal pride, the pleasure specifically for me of being able to cover what Scott Rueck has done, accomplished at Oregon State through the years. It is obviously a time of transition here in women's basketball, but Coach, I would argue that you are very much the constant when it comes to your approach and the way in which you operate a program. So welcome to the program. And, I just as a place to start, when you think of the path you've taken, you go back to, the George Fox days. Prior to that, could you ever have imagined so many twists and turns in the career you've had?
No. First off, thanks for having me. It's great to be
Sure.
with you. I appreciate the time and opportunity. Year 29, I just wanted to be a high school basketball coach, and one thing led to another, and I'm coaching at the college game at the small college level and coaching in the women's game, which, I fell in love with day one. And um, it was such a simple life. It was hard. The D3 experience is such a grind, and back then there was no such thing as a full-time assistant coach even, so in many ways it was, a one-person show. And I loved that grind and the simplicity, but I wondered how long I could do it. I think this job was going to kill me, to do it at the level that I thought, it needed to be done at. But I've loved every step of the way. And when the Oregon State experience happened, certainly that added layer upon layer of complexity, and now obviously, things have just spiraled to the point where so many uncertainties surround us, and you just learn to operate within it, do the best you can every day, and stay true to what this is. And this is really just helping people grow, develop, and provide them opportunities to become the very best version of themselves, which will then create opportunities for them in their lives. And then, my mission has always been impact as many people as possible along the way, and bring them along with you. And so those things haven't changed, so while a lot of the circumstances and variables have, the core of it is the same.
It's fascinating. And again, at every level, at every turn, there's been the two hallmarks, which is success and an understanding that none of this will be done halfway by you, by your staff, by your team. It is the effort that we have all come to understand is the given over 30 years here now, that you've been doing this work. I do think it's fascinating the way in which we are who we are at a pretty early age. And I remember I did a profile on you many years ago now, and you told me a story about dribbling a basketball in a talent show and getting to do that at a really early age. Can you take our listeners through that story, number one, and number two, how much you feel like you discovered everything that came after in that moment?
That's amazing. I was looking at a scrapbook just 2 days ago and found a pic. I didn't know we had pictures of it, but I found two pictures of that exact moment. And so that was kindergarten for me, the kindergarten talent show. My mom helped me. My dad was a coach, so I grew up in the gym. So I was already a ball boy, for a high school team. at age 5. And so I wanted to dribble the ball up on stage, and she wanted to dress me like a globetrotter. And so I'm wearing red, white, and blue. And I remember I had to put on red tights, and then I also remember that the stage had dead spots in it, and it just, the ball wasn't responding like I wanted, and that was frustrating to me. But it's been a lifelong journey with this sport, and that was one of those key moments, back in the day, to kind of galvanize it, into my soul, that even at 5'4", this was going to be my journey, and of course it's been full speed ahead ever since.
I don't claim to be a social media expert, but I would have to think that posting those pictures, they do very well. So it's just but
I
what
don't know.
free advice. But
Thank you.
this for sure. Feel free to dispose of it. But as you think about this time at Oregon State, being able to impact these lives is obviously something really significant to you, but being able to do it so close to home over this extended period of time, how much does that change the way your day-to-day life is? I would imagine you run into more people from your past, your present. They kind of all come together in that way. And how special is that element of it for you?
It's a massive blessing. Certainly there's added stuff that comes with it. You're not anonymous anywhere, but I grew up in Hillsborough, just outside Portland, and my parents were both public school teachers, and they knew everybody. We went to the same church, or they still go to the same church that my dad grew up in West Portland, and so this community of support is overwhelming. I've got family and relatives that come to every game still. And so, we won them over back in those George Fox days, where that drive to Newburgh was short, just 30 minutes from Portland.
Yeah.
And those teams were so good at the end that we were drawing very well at the Division III level. And then Oregon State happened. And to say that you've been able to work, with the assistant years, 32 years now, at the collegiate level, coaching college women, in 90 minutes, a 90-minute radius, or maybe even 75-minute radius, is really, I feel so fortunate, and then to be at my school, Oregon State, the only place I said back in the day that I would have left George Fox for was this place.
Right.
This is my alma mater. This is where my mom went, a place that I know and love so much and so well, and I see all the value in. It means the world to me, and so it's that added drive. I want to make our fans smile, because I'm one of them. I've been one my whole life. And so for me, those who don't know me, I was here when Gary Payton played here. And so I was in Gill Coliseum every night. I watched every game he played. I'm a year younger than him, so his last 3 years. And the greatest showman in college basketball history, probably. It's how it seemed anyway. And so Gill Coliseum was 10,400 every single night. And so I lived that experience, and I had that vision. And, the picture behind me, that's our first ever sellout, in 2017, Oregon State versus Stanford. That night, we were both 14-2, playing for the conference title, at least a share of it. And I walked out that night, and, my vision was, if we build it, I know Beaver fans will come and support us. I know we will draw. And my vision was maybe not a sellout. I didn't know if that was possible, but I walked out that night to that game, and I was just overwhelmed. That was beyond my dream, so we've been able to accomplish some very special things here, and we continue to, and it's just such a great fit for me. And the type of student athlete that we draw here just makes, the quality of life so great. And I'm 2 stoplights from home, and so there's a great quality of life here, and it's just been a very special, special place.
And I think it's, by the way, I have to point out, you guys won that game as well, 50-47.
We did win that game.
Yeah, so it was also, you sent the fans home happy as well. But yeah, the bottom line is that, and again, we're going to talk more about this in segment 2, segment 3, but the ability to build around programs where there's an understanding of the program's DNA, I think, is obviously central to how it needs to be done. And I don't know that there's a better correlation between coach and fit, for all the reasons that you talked about, in doing that than what you are doing and are about to do at Oregon State. Obviously, it's a very different landscape and we want to talk about what that transition, what that newness is for you now going into segment 2. So back with a lot more with Scott Rueck, who I'm always delighted to speak with. I'm Howard Megdal. You're listening to Locked On Women's Basketball. But first, Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by, and I love that this is one of our sponsors today, Ultimate College Basketball Head Coach. So if you want to simulate the Scott Rueck experience, you can go try Ultimate College Basketball Head Coach. It gives you an opportunity through an app. It's probably a little less intense than the actual experience, but Ultimate College Basketball Head Coach gets as close as you possibly can be without being qualified to do it. You control every detail of your program, from recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps, handling NIL deals, and managing scholarships. It's all in your hands. Even when it comes to game time, you can draw up offensive plays, set your strategy, and the way you play won't just affect the current season, it shapes the future of the program. It's a game that lets you feel the full weight of what it means to be a head coach and lead your team to glory. So, special offer for you guys, Locked On NBA listeners, use promo code LOCKEDONCBB, all caps, inside the game store to get a free boost for your program. It's the perfect way to kickstart your coaching career. Download Ultimate College Basketball HC. Just visit ultimate-cbb.com or look it up on the app stores. Begin your coaching legacy today. See, you spent all that time winning at George Fox. You could have just downloaded an app. Could have saved all this time.
I was thinking that. I think I could use the practice to get some extra reps.
Fair enough. Wow. We are back with Scott Rueck of Oregon State talking about the program, past, present, and future. And so just as a point of personal privilege, I want to go back to the regionals that happened last spring. And watching your team, it was the given, the same way I covered you when you were in the Final Four. It was this understanding of what your team was capable of doing, that the team built in, knew, understood what was possible in a way that people didn't necessarily accept as it related to your group. And then comes this transition, and you have players transfer, and you're entering a new conference, and it's a whole new landscape. And I don't know. You hear people writing off Oregon State, and I'm just thinking, like, have you looked back at history? Have you seen that again and again that's done, and people look very foolish after they do so? And so I know you like to, I know that powers you sometimes. I'm wondering how much that's played a part as you sort of think through what the future is. Undeniably different. The conference literally does not exist anymore, the Pac-12. In the form it did. But how much does that play a part in the way you sort of think about how you're going to build over the next few years?
I've never shied away from a challenge. In fact, the George Fox job, they had not won a conference title, there before I got the job. And so that was the vision, was let's do something that hasn't been done. How great can we make this? Is it possible? And when you start out, you don't really know if it's possible. You just go hard, and you kind of have fun with that mystery. Can we win here? I mean, nobody's expecting it. Nobody really thinks we can. And so you take a little, private Christian school in Newberg, Oregon, and, you just go fearless. Let's find a way. Let's see if we can do this. And then let's go toe to toe with, Washington University, in the national championship game, a program we probably had no business thinking we could beat, with 10 true freshmen and no returning starters on that team, and you beat them and you go undefeated, and then you teach yourself and you learn that anything's possible.
Right.
And then Oregon State happened, and people had told me, don't take that job, I'm scared for you. I heard that. And I'm like, perfect. That sounds fun. And so let's see what we can do. And then you win at a place where nobody thinks is possible. So now we're in another scenario. We did the initial, build, and, blessed to be with all the people that were a part of it. And, as you mentioned, got to a Final Four, and then tried to sustain through all that. And, then COVID happens, and COVID wasn't kind to us, and we ended up having a wave of transfers, kind of around that time for all the various reasons. And, it was very disruptive, and then the conference thing happened, and so obviously, again, very disruptive to everything that we're doing. But the core of what we do is teach and coach and try to help people do things they didn't think were possible, and put together a great team and have a chance to win every night. And then sometimes you get to, and then sometimes you get to win a lot. And, so here we are again. Well, the parameters have changed. Nobody thinks it's possible. Let's find a way again. And let's just stay true to who we are, because if you take care of people, you put them together and you coach them and you help them grow, and then you let them lead and take off, they can do amazing things, So the challenge is, through those transitional periods, was learning what the parameters are. And so there's been so much gray within this that a year ago, I didn't think, I can't speak for all of them, but I didn't feel like all 8 people that left wanted to leave necessarily. They just didn't know the answers necessarily to have enough to hang on and stay. And I can't speak to them. But, I love all of them. And I just felt terrible for everybody involved in the situation. It wasn't fair to any of us. None of us signed up for that. Yet there we were. And so then we just had to make the best decision we could figure out for themselves and ourselves. And, for me, there was no part of me that's like looking to bounce. It was like, let's just sort through this and see if there's a way to make it work, now. So now we know a little bit more of what's to come. Recruiting is becoming a little bit easier because we have more definitive parameters, and there's more to talk about that's confirmed, and for sure in an ever-changing world, so so managing chaos but staying true to yourself within it, has just been the answer.
And it's fascinating too. And a couple of points out of that, right? Number one being the idea that people can say with any sort of definitive sense, oh, this can happen, this can't happen, when so much is unknown, always seemed ridiculous to me. There's so much unknown. Let's see where the chips fall. And then, people need to operate in a new landscape. So that alone was something where, I don't know, people having certainty about the future, always, I'm a little suspect about it in general, but especially in college basketball now, at a point where, yes, to your point, what changed, as a basketball guy, the fact that football, to my mind, a lesser sport, ended up dictating a lot of what took place in basketball, was very frustrating to see in and of itself. But you talk also about knowing what's ahead, and the West Coast Conference is a really good conference. A West Coast Conference was always going to be a challenge as you guys moved into it, but it gives you a base of operations to work from. It gives you a sense of the type of player that you're able to bring in, and they're going to understand sort of what the challenge is ahead. And I wonder, does it change your geographical footprint? Do you find yourself being able to appeal in a different way? What are those, when you talk about the givens now, what are those givens? What are the ways that you've been able to operate in more of the black and white now when it comes to recruiting?
Well, just the fact that the Pac-12 will be a conference again in 2 years, so we know that that's going forward. We have 8 members right now. Gonzaga joined us, which speaks to the basketball brand, within that conference. And so having that, as we're recruiting the 26 class, 27 class, they know, what's to come, as in a greater sense than they did previously. Previously, we didn't have anything. We were like, okay, temporarily, we're going to be in the West Coast. So the non-conference, we proved this year that we're going to schedule up. We did. It was the toughest non-conference that we've played.
Can I interrupt and ask, how did you feel about that? That was quite a challenge heading into this, this new era, and to schedule in that way. You certainly didn't give yourself any off days.
No, I felt great about it, because that's what this is. It's like, okay, what's the model forward for us? If we're in what's perceived as a mid-major. Now, it's a good mid-major. The West Coast a year ago, I'm a Massey ratings guy. Massey had the West Coast Conference as the 9th best conference right now. I think it's 7 or 6 with us and Washington State coming in. It's very well coached. It's competitive every night. It's one of those, and I've had fun watching it over the years. And so, and knowing it well. So we knew we needed to increase our strength of schedule. We had a contract in our hand to play South Carolina opening night. I think Michigan ended up taking that spot on TNT.
Right.
If the team would have stayed intact, that's where we would have been. With all the adjustments and changes, obviously, we felt like that was not the best option for us moving into this year's non-conference. But scheduling up was exactly what this group needed. And while it didn't result in many wins, it resulted in a ton of growth. And then we've seen the product of that, or the byproduct of that, recently in just the way we've closed out games, and the way this team's really elevated in their kind of infancy together. And that challenge I've loved. That has been I joke that this job right now, I'm playing on all Madden. I don't know if any video game people out there, but when you're playing Madden, there's different levels of difficulty. And right now we're all Madden right now. This is very challenging, what we're doing, but it's still the same. I love helping people grow, helping people learn, helping people develop, and manage things that at the time they are maybe a little bit too hard.
Right.
Well, you can still have success through that, and eventually you'll level up. And you just got to stick with it, and so that's where we are right now. So the constants we are what we are as a program. We make pros here. We are supported insanely well by this fan base. It's the warmest environment that I can imagine, just the warmest community. Oregon State basketball is the same. The outside circumstances have changed, but it's the same. So there is a consistency and a certainty within all of the changing world that we live in we are going to be who we've been, and we are proving that, this year. With this group, we have 6 different countries represented on our team right now, a team where 7 of the 12 member players and athletes, were brought together in the month of May, really, and that's very unique. Well, from day one, they just blended. We just had a Christmas party. It was like the loudest Christmas party we've had. It was, so this group is on brand with Oregon State, who we are and who we've always been. And that will continue, so I see those things being the staples. Our tournament on Maui is just a beautiful outreach opportunity and a great experience for all of us and the teams that come, and that will stay, and our funding stays. And so not as much has changed as I think people believe.
That's so interesting. And so we're going to get to a break. I want to talk more about even that evolution this year, because like you said, specifically this year, during this interregnum period, for lack of a better phrase, right? This was always going to be the most challenging thing to figure out. So the way in which you guys have figured it out in a lot of ways right away is really significant. So I want to get back to that in segment 3. Back with Scott Rueck. I'm Howard Megdal. You're listening to Locked On Women's Basketball. Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by Game Time, and Game Time gives you the opportunity to go to live events, whether it's Oregon State basketball, which I cannot recommend highly enough, whether it's music, theater, comedy, you name it. I've got a bunch of Broadway folks in my own immediate family, and we just used Game Time for the opportunity to enjoy it. Game Time gives you last-minute discounts, gives you the opportunity to see 360-degree view from wherever you are sitting. My younger daughter's a basketball junkie, so she has to make sure she knows exactly what she's seeing on the court when we go and do that. So Game Time gives you the chance to do all of that. How do you do it? Go ahead and download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Back here, segment 3, talking with Scott Rueck of Oregon State. And I want to just run through this early season schedule, because it's people should understand the challenge that you gave yourselves and the way in which you responded to it. And an early loss against Minnesota, it was not a close score. By the time you're playing UConn, it was a 71-52 loss. It was a game where you guys were competitive against a team that is one of the best in the country. And then there was, I mean, it did your heart good to see it as a human. You get that win in that tournament over Boston College. What was that like for you, walking into that locker room, putting that win on the board in a year where you had all of these early season challenges?
Yeah, that weekend was so magical for us. The way that you just wait for these moments as a coach for where things level up, where they start to see themselves different. And you put UConn on the schedule. Certainly, that's a target off season long. Getting ready for that game, and the only way you have a shot is to take things to another level. And in the first half, certainly we were overwhelmed. Then, the second half, this team defended at a level that we hadn't. And there's only one way to get to the next level, and that is just to, basically be punched in the face to where you figure out, man, I got to fight different, than I'm fighting right now, or that it's different than what I thought it was. And I have to go harder than I thought I needed to. I've never actually gone this hard before. And that is exactly what happened in that game. So that game changed our team. The second half, we were, we outscored them in the second half. We went 8 for 10 from the field in the fourth quarter. And so in many ways, there were lots of individual and collective wins within that. And, my first couple of years here, it was hard for us to win games, especially year one. So I hadn't had a losing season yet. And so I learned you can't pay attention to that scoreboard. It's a liar. And I'd already learned that you can't pay attention to it in wins. But now I'm learning you can't pay attention to it in losses, because we actually had a ton of success today and actually played maybe our best game and we lost. So who cares what that scoreboard says right now? This was a big win for us. Then, to turn it into a win against Boston College in the next game, down the stretch to get the stops we needed. I mean, there's a big difference between being somewhat close and winning and making the plays down the stretch. And we got the defensive stops. They were locked in. And then on the offensive end, we got the scores, we executed down the stretch, and we hit the shots, and so that weekend showed this team what they were capable of. And we had a taste of our potential. And so, walking in there, just massively proud, of the fight, and for this team to be so courageous as they were.
And it wasn't a one-off. Again, you talked about having to win games down the stretch. For you guys to be able to do that in back-to-back ways against Gonzaga, and I believe it was Portland's first loss of the season when you guys beat them in OT. How significant is that for coming to understand what this group is not just doing, but what they're capable of becoming?
Well, I really believe, once again, that we're just scratching the surface with this group. Everybody's in a different role. It's actually a group of players that have been role players, not in high school, of course, but at the college level, they've all been role players until this point. And now we're asking them to be, alphas and primary, go-to scorers, and have to get out of a comfort zone every day, all day, and rise. And, in order to so first off, that's beautiful. That's what you hope everybody has an opportunity to do in life. We all go through that, that transformation at some point where we have to step up differently. And it's really fun to help them through that. And so those wins that we played well on Maui as well. And we're very competitive with Miami. Western Kentucky's a really nice team, and we played really well against them. So we had this confidence going into the Christmas break and came back, and then you're thrown to the wolves, on the 28th, we're at Gonzaga, the preseason favorite. And then Portland hasn't lost. And 2 days later, we're at Portland, a team that plays as hard as anybody anywhere. And for this team to go into those two places, overcome deficits, we're down 12 with 3 minutes or 4 minutes to go at Gonzaga, find a way to pull that thing out in overtime. And then go to Portland again, overtime, find a way to win in overtime. Kind of against the odds. We were down, I think, 6 with a few minutes to go at Portland too, and we found a way to get back into it. It just showed. I'll just say that was one of my favorite weekends that I can remember. We've had some great weekends, but that was right up there for who this team is, to make the plays and find ways like that, off of the break, was just remarkable. And so it just made me so happy.
To have the players, to have AJ Murat and Kelsey Rees, people who stuck around, people who are sticking with your program and getting the opportunity now, getting expanded roles, getting the chance to do it, is there an added feeling of pride in, knowing that you get to keep building with them specifically?
For sure. I mean, absolutely. For everybody made decisions last year that they felt were, the
Sure.
best one for them. And for these ones, they stayed, Kennedy Schuler, Sela Heidi, Sue Yepes, they chose to stay and to fight, against the odds. It made sense for them. And so, you just want them to have success, and have their decision validated beyond, just the everyday experience that, I hope they're enjoying. I think they do, obviously. But to have that success on the court, was just, extra special.
Bet against Scott Rueck at your peril, everybody. That is my advice now and for always. Coach, I appreciate your time. Our listeners, I thank you for making us your first listen every day. Other than a upgrade in the host chair, because it'll be Gigi Spear tomorrow. You can join us tomorrow as you do 6 days a week. Until then, I am Howard Megdal, wishing all of you a wonderful Wednesday.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.